What's going on? Boys, arm yourselves. Life stuff. We're going to try to cover, two topics today, both skeleton adjacent. I knew my boss and I were not going to get along perfectly forever. And we're still cool, but not getting close ended up being useful. If you are giving to people long enough, even if you are giving just to select people, they will eventually, inevitably, start taking that state you rise to achieve for them for granted. And I knew that was going to happen because that's what always happens, but I was not expecting it to happen this way. He's hit me with a few big asks recently, and for each of them, as I have come to do with most things, all I said was yes, because I came to develop a level of trust. Either this decision is the right decision, even if I don't entirely understand it, or if it's the wrong decision, then he will take responsibility for it. Meaning, in an effort to be a good employee and to make the organization run smoother, I just do it. But a few things have happened recently in short order. I don't like when people are inconsistent generally, but especially not when that inconsistency means breaking an agreement. Triple especially when they break that agreement and act like we never agreed on it. And typically, they really don't like when I can prove that we did agree on it. Always keep records of everything. That's happened a few times now. And then there are three auxiliary incidents I think are contributing to this general change in attitude. Number one, our financials started getting a little fucky-wucky, and I needed to handle some things I don't normally handle, and two, frankly, am not equipped to handle. I handled them. I did, pulled that shit out of my ass, and made it work. But in the flurry, I filed a contract one of our subcommittees put together in the awaiting response bin, my awaiting response bin. And you know it's deep fucked. Maybe my brain was fried that day because my records show that that is where it was supposed to be. But going through all my records, there is nothing indicating that it was supposed to be there. So I completely missed it. And the head of this subcommittee, somebody not many people like, but especially not my boss, instead of checking in with me to get a sit rep on it, started pestering my boss and forced him to resolve it. And then, after it was already resolved without my knowing, this individual contacted me to get the sit rep and get me moving on it and inform me I was late on it, which I needed to update my boss on, and when I went to him, he let me know he already handled it. In a get your shit together sort of way. So this subcommittee person gives me something that they could have handled themselves, but they gave it to me. As I'm in the middle of doing a bunch of work outside my job description, and then when it doesn't get there when they need it, instead of contacting me, they know he doesn't like them. So they bother him to piss him off, to get him pissed at me, and then they don't tell me that, knowing when I go to him, because that's when something like this happens, I have to let him know, I'm going to get shit on for it. 2. This one's complicated, but we've been using a specific service and service provider for reasons. And when I found out, I didn't make a fuss. In fact, I leaned into it and ensured we used this service provider whenever possible. And you would think people would recognize that and appreciate it, that discretion and that camaraderie. But no, that's not enough. That service provider started getting greedy and interfering with things. And at that point, when personal issues start affecting money, especially in a negative way, you have to do something. Not even because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the safe thing to do. When money, community service, and organizational health are involved, you can't be petty. And when you've already been receiving preferential treatment, you shouldn't be petty. But you cannot expect people to be reasonable and not greedy. And when people are being petty and unreasonable, they're going to try to make you look petty and unreasonable. That's one of the reasons I hate this idea everyone should always try to be reasonable with people in all situations. Because most of the people you're going to be dealing with, professionally at a higher level, and just generally, people generally, are going to present their unreasonableness, their pettiness, their nastiness as reason so they can tear you down and do whatever they want to do. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, in this instance, the crux of this issue came down to data, or a lack thereof. And God bless, I'm in a position I can, if I need certain data, I can get certain data, and I think people don't realize I can get certain data, and I can get it quickly. And I'm beginning to understand and appreciate and fear marginalization as a tactic. It sucks that it works, and it's a nasty thing, but even when you're aware it's happening, it still works if you let it work. And basically what marginalization is, in the tool sense, the way I understand it, is not making someone's one opinion look foolish, but making their entire thought process look foolish enough times that individual is going to feel too ashamed or afraid to speak up at all, and if they do, anything they say is going to be perceived not as an opinion, an argument, but as something to laugh at, to reinforce the first thing, making them not want to speak up at all. And marginalization stinks because it's like mustard gas. It's not always good people getting marginalized, or that marginalization should never be used. A statement loaded with implications if you think about chemical weapons. Marginalization is a tool, and you need to understand how it works so you can use it and defend against it. Because if you can make it work for you, you really can shut down a lot of problems or problem generators before they get bad. But this is all an ongoing thing, and while my boss isn't really on one side or the other, I know for a fact he is pissed off that this is happening at all. That these issues are being brought up and I'm dealing with them in not friendly ways. But there isn't a pretty way to deal with corruption. You see something wrong and you do something about it, or you don't. And then the third thing, with some context and life thoughts. The Boondocks. Thugnificent. What did he do to make them that mad? Let's imagine you managed to make someone so mad, to hate you so much, they take you out of this world. What sort of action, aggression do you think you would have had to have taken against this person to have made them that mad at you? I'm finding in the most unreasonable, irrational, petty way, not very much. You could do something as simple as not pass someone the salt because you didn't hear them, for that to turn into a huge grudge. Nothing can turn into a huge grudge. And you might never know until that person, over however long, has worked themselves into such a hate frenzy they jump you. And you might think that's bullshit, that's exaggeration, that'll never happen. And I cannot wait for you to learn this lesson from experience. I can't wait. It is such a tremendous shock learning not only does this happen, but this is common. One of Slim's nemesis became one of his nemesis because one time 7 years ago he suggested she do something a different way. And it took me, I'd say, a year to put this together because it's so minor. There's no way that could have been what it was. But no, this nemesis was making a bad decision. Slim informed her it was a bad decision and it probably wouldn't turn out well. She didn't listen, and then it didn't turn out well, and she blamed him instead of herself. And that one incident turned into years of escalating hostility over nothing. Anyway, to our incident with this, Slim has made it clear he does not like me grammar checking anything. And normally I don't. Only a few times I have recommended grammar changes because they are egregiously wrong, and I have the book to prove it, and he was very dismissive of it. So that's another one of these things I just go, yes. Okay. You don't want me to bother you about this, I won't bother you about this. No more close reading or grammar checking. You are responsible for your writing. Well, he ended up putting out a bunch of information with someone's name misspelled. And I didn't catch it until after it was already out, because it's minor enough to be missed, but it's still wrong, and I have been asked not to be in grammar mode. And when I brought it to his attention, he was very angry. And the vibe I was getting from this anger was anger at me for catching it after it's already out instead of beforehand. Instead of taking responsibility for fucking it up in the first place. After not wanting me to be a proofreader because grammar doesn't matter, it's not that important. And I thought this was going to be something he let go, or would let go, but he hasn't. He's referenced it a number of times, and he's been increasingly snarky toward me, including when he has no grounds to be. I can understand a degree of snarkiness when I fuck something up, because I fucked it up and I'm to blame. It's different when you're snarky to someone because you fuck something up. And this is all lining up with some of these big asks and broken agreements. And it hit me today. There's no way that is what all of this other stuff is about. There's no way. But unfortunately, it probably is. All it takes is one wrong instance of the wrong nothing that upsets someone to create growing resentments. And it's not like we have a bad working relationship or it's going to explode. I mean, it might, shit, it probably will. I'm going to hope it doesn't. But I'm dealing with increasing amounts of petty personal shit that shouldn't affect us professionally getting taken out on me. And not just from one source. Back to the first point, that subcommittee thing, I guarantee you that was because I disrespected this person. Because they kept fucking with someone. I think I know I talked about this on the channel. They kept fucking with someone, and they knew not to do it, and I had to say something, and I was not happy friendly when I did it, because we said earlier, when you're dealing with people like this, you can't fight friendly. I guarantee you that's where that came from. And so many instances like these nowadays. In addition to just personal stuff, I'm in tax debt and I'm holding my breath because the IRS, if you want to give them money, they're going to make your life hell. But if you don't want to give them money, they are really going to make your life hell. I owe money and I can't pay it, but if I don't pay it, I'm going to be in deep shit. All the good people I like and are moral people, are leaving. Every single one. Every time I meet anyone I really hold in high esteem, they leave. Or they're made to leave. Last year, I mentioned I was doing some volunteer work when I was in my hustle grinding era, before I was deep in the nonprofit sector. That volunteering work was doing dishes for this woman who started a restaurant, one to fund, she adopts kids. She's adopted like 20 something kids in her life. She started a restaurant, one because it's something she always wanted to do, two because she wanted to give disaffected people a chance, give them just some work. And I liked her and I believed in her mission, so I would go in there because at the time I worked very close to this place. I would get off work, I would go over there and I would wash dishes for a couple hours for free just because I liked her. She was a very good person. Is a very good person. But people who didn't like her because she was threatening, evil people, when evil people see a very good person, they feel personally threatened by them and need to do everything they can to destroy them and ensure they don't succeed. So they started fucking with her professionally, which made me double down in helping her because fuck that. And then it's really disgusting. It's sickening. They start fucking with her kids. And she can't take it. She doesn't want her kids to have to deal with this, and she leaves. Because this whole area is just evil. I have a few low-level government contacts, maintenance people. Two of my really good acquaintances. One of them is, I don't know what his position is officially called, but he's like the head of public works, whatever you want to call it. And the other guy I really like is his assistant. That head dude is leaving because this town is doomed. People have no respect for, and I mean, I understand hating government, but don't be a vandal. Don't break shit. Don't burn shit down. Is it that hard? Is it so hard not to destroy things people are working very hard to make nice. And he's getting paid jack shit money, and he's leaving. And there are others, but that assistant dude is starting to take over his position. And we had a good conversation that made me feel like I'm not crazy. Because he is, if I had to type him, I would say he's probably a very high level ISFP. And I don't meet many of them, which makes him all the more interesting. Regardless, we come from completely different backgrounds, completely different points of view, not just socially, but cognitively, and he is observing and coming to all the same conclusions I've been coming to without prompting him. And he's probably gonna leave. There is no place on the planet for decent, hardworking, moral people to live. And we'll get to this. I don't view myself as a moral person. Tombstones. If you could put, we'll do it a little earlier. If you could put anything on my tombstone, I would want it to be consistent, next line, not completely awful. Because I'm aware I do good things. I do a bunch of really bad things. And I think most people are fundamentally bad. I mean, all people are bad, but I think there is a class of people who are more good than bad and are able to maintain that. And I think those good people deserve a place to be good and be happy, and there isn't one. And it's infuriating. I just took a cleansing piss, a thoughtful piss, and realized this is going to be a long video because we're 20 minutes in and I haven't even gotten to the point yet. This all to say, Slim and I are similar enough, not completely awful in such a way. I would have thought he would have been better than this. And he is, I think, but what really kills me is not because you can't control what other people do. All you can control, or not necessarily control, because you really can't, you really don't have much of a say in how you feel and all these things, but you do have some say in yourself. I'm disgusted with men who are pouty. I'm disgusted with men who throw slow burn, long fuse temper tantrums. I'm upset, and I'm going to ensure nobody else is allowed to be happy. As a man in public, I think a standard worth striving toward, and the standard I tried to hold myself to, is to be mellow, to be firm, and to be personable. To be a kindly presence and a presence, but a kindly one. And I'm normally able to pull that off even when I'm feeling awful, or when it's clear that that is not how I actually feel. It is clear that I am making an effort not to let the way I clearly feel affect other people negatively. Well, today, this morning specifically, I failed that miserably. I was in a bad mood, slow burn temper tantrum, and I didn't try to hide it. And upon thinking about it, I'm realizing I was feeling that way because there were enough things wrong that I couldn't fix and couldn't go off on is the word, but just not express it. Because in these situations, expressing the way you're actually feeling is not the play. If you're going to express yourself in a professional environment, you express yourself with action, right? Because if you try to express yourself with expression, all you do is make an ass of yourself and dig your hole deeper. If something is bothering you, you don't throw a fit and talk about your feelings, you address the problem and make whatever's bothering you go away. So many things mounting up that I can't do that with. So I can't express myself with action, and I can't express myself with expression, and I feel bad. I feel hurt, even. Not as hurt as I could have, but hurt enough with a bunch of stuff. These things mount up. It's like radiation. I'm so sick, I am involuntarily expressing myself in a way I find repulsive socially and practically. And it was bad enough Slim asked me what my problem was. And I knew I was not keeping it in well. And that, again, not entirely the same, but similar thing happens in 2 weeks, twice in 2 weeks, and it's on the verge of hitting me. Everything all at once. Why can't I make anything work? My hairs are graying. I'm trying so hard to figure out how to make everything work. And nothing does. Nothing works. But when you're on the verge of a breakdown like this, last time the person might have cared to help me through these emotions. In this instance, definitely not. Certainly not. And you need to ask yourself, what does crying and complaining about how nothing works accomplish? Are you going to cry a solution into existence? Are people going to see you upset and decide to be nicer to you and help you? Is God going to come down and save you? No. No, and no. All you do with a breakdown is break down. Nothing gets better. All you do is make the situation worse. But you can't repress your feelings. You really do need to cry. It's going to accomplish nothing, but if you try to repress this feeling, they're only going to fester and to get so much worse. I think sorrow like this is part of your shadow, because if you try to repress it, all it does is get stronger and stronger and strong enough to take over, and then you don't have a say. So today, in real time, I had to figure out how to address the crying child inside while also keeping steel knuckles on the wheel. And I did it with a skeleton. God bless skeletons. Fixating on that lich image, manifesting it into the creases of my brain, actually did something. Fixating on my identifying as a skeleton got me through that moment, and then when I had a few minutes, I sat down, and I hate poetry, but I sat down and I thought back to my poetry classes in university, and my student loans, the government has turned me into, you're playing a video game. I found out as much as I pay on my loans, I am not actually paying them off at all. They're actually growing. So they have found a free money exploit in me, and I still don't regret taking those loans and taking those classes because of moments like these. Think back to the poetry classes, sit down and write a skeleton poem that captures how I feel and functions as something like a litany against fear, but more personalized and for me more effective. that litany never really did anything for me. And why a skeleton? It's not just death, it is the state of death. We've been talking a lot recently about higher consciousness and now lower consciousness, or what we would call lower consciousness, but different consciousness, material mind. Your skeleton, your decayed bones, are like matter you. They are you, low consciousness. You alive feel, but you dead don't feel, but you're still you. You aren't. When you imagine yourself as a skeleton, you imagine your skeleton, you imagine this lower consciousness you are not repressing your feelings. You aren't necessarily answering them or resolving them, but you are locating them within the bigger picture. You might be rot right now, but when you have rotted, the feelings you're feeling right now aren't going to matter. When you're dead, you aren't going to give a shit, because skeletons literally just vibe. That's the second skeleton poem I wrote after I got a little more time and got kind of on a roll and got in a better mood and started having fun. I'm going to read the first poem, titled To Accept Your Struggle. I am a skeleton. I'm dead. I have no eyes to cry or a heart to hurt. Worms crawl through holes in my skull and wind blows between my ribs. My soul went to heaven or to hell, and I stayed here. I am a skeleton. I'm dead. Skeletons don't hurt. Skeletons are going to last longer than you will in your fleshy form, and I don't want to alarm you, but you have a skeleton inside you right now. Worse, you are the skeleton. But the idea is, whatever it is you're feeling is only a small, limited, and ephemeral aspect of you. When you are a skeleton just vibing, propped up against a tree, maybe growing into it somewhat, you aren't going to cry because you can't. That aspect of you has departed. Living you would be the intersection between higher consciousness and lower consciousness, or tonal or vibration consciousness, and solid consciousness, material consciousness. When you die, that connection is severed, and the aspect of you that stays here in the material world, it doesn't just stay in the material world, it rejoins the material world. And the material world doesn't feel, at least in any way we understand. I'm butchering this, but connecting with your skeleton ancestry, it felt like I was answering both things at once. I answered my feelings, and I was able to hold firm. How does that do both? Clearly, I don't know. We'll keep thinking about it, but it saved me. God bless skeletons. You're tapping into yet another part of yourself, aspect of yourself, that is there to help you. And that image got me thinking about Conan shit. Because, like Kenshi vibes, the Conan vibe goes far beyond Conan. The same way Kenshi captures something, Conan captures another something. And it's something spiritual that Allegory, a few videos ago I couldn't remember that word, it's Allegory. Conan vibe is a fun allegory for the world we live in. And we aren't actually going to talk about Conan or Conan. We're going to talk primarily about Conan vibe using the Path of Acra. Mentioned it last time, didn't really get a chance to get into it. The Path of Acra articulates in game form the Conan vibe, the skeleton vibe, and I would argue something very close to the Soa vibe. And I think Soa does have a vibe. The Path of Acra shows pretty close to the way I view the world, or what I view the world as. So in the Path of Acra, and this is all speculation because I love games that don't spell everything out for you, and not in the Dark Souls sense, right? Because when you play a Souls-like game these days, because people infected them so much, and they infected them because they're built to be infected, but coded message, you put all the things together, this is exactly what you get. No, the Path of Acra is closer to Metal Gear Solid 5 in the sense there is something clear going on, but you're never going to get full answers because you aren't ever going to have all the full answers, and those full answers might not exist for you to have, but that doesn't detract from the fact that there is a single something going on. And I think that's a lot like real life. You have a feeling about what's going on, an intuition, and then you collect scraps of scraps to try to figure out as much as you can and piece together the rest with deduction. I love that shit. And because it's the Conan vibe, it is also in part the Lovecraft vibe, meaning there is not, well, not necessarily not one specific answer, but not knowing and can knowing at once. That contradiction, that synthesis is the point. You're dropped in this harsh spit of land in an endless sea, which sounds familiar, and your only two options are either dying in the starting area, weak and not knowing shit, or developing your own power and trying to get to the end of the world, the end of your life, and figure out as much as you can along the way. What is it? Only knowledge will I save? And you come from one of a few weird fantasy races, and not just, I mean, I love the not exactly human, but also not elves or dwarves fantasy races. I love that shit. That is so interesting and uncomfortable. And then one of a few casts of training. I mean, it is a class, but it's Conan vibe, right? So it's not a healer, it's a particular sort of healer adapted to a harsh land of bandits and awful weather and cruel Lovecraftian gods. Love it. And then you choose the god you worship. Whom do you pray to? I pray to Crom, I pray to the Four Winds. Your god lives below mine, go fuck yourself. And isn't all that perfect and true to reality if you are someone born to walk the path? You're dropped in this place in a spit or in a sea of harsh void, of death, of nothing, in a world you don't understand, that is not built for you to understand entirely, because this is the land of the gods, if you didn't know. And all you can do, if you don't want to die and O pilgrim, let your name be forgotten. Develop your discipline and force your way forward to the tower at the end of the world. Serving a god, maybe a guide, who also serves you in some weird way, competing with so many other gods, and not just a pantheon. Oh, I love when time and divinity overlap. Not just a pantheon of gods all acting at their peak all at once, but some gods who are older, some gods who are older and past their prime, some gods who are young, some gods who might not actually be gods, some gods who are gods but don't want to be gods. You're serving one of them, they're serving you, and for us, we're polytheistic even though we don't really have names or distinctions for what other gods are out there. But I love it. Oh boy, do I love it. And you're here, you're on this path, not just because it's a game to get to the end, but oh struggler, oh pilgrim, you are walking the path because you are a pathwalker. Your destiny is to join your god or go further. And that's what the end of the game is. You don't just reach the end of the world and ascend, you spend time in ascendancy and go further. I really think you would enjoy the Path of Acra. Our audience is weird in that a surprisingly low number of our viewers are actual hyper nerds. So when I recommend games, I quietly try to recommend games that are complicated mechanically or narratively, but simple enough to be played with just your mouse. This is one of them. You can play the Path of Acra completely with just your mouse. Confusing and complicated when you get in for the first time, but it's a roguelike, you're meant to go through it 100 times, something like that, trying different things, piecing things together. You can play it by just clicking on your mouse. It's a lot of fun, $10, and boy, it got that Conan, Soa, struggler vibe. You are the beast you worship type media. And skeleton vibes. I like a game that lets you play as a skeleton, straight up. But that was the other thing. The last thing, it's technically part of part 2, could be a part 3, but we spoke last time about the connective tissue, the genius of an emerging race. A race being people who are different in every single way, coming together, unified by some ideal that, for their epoch, strikes them all, unites them, and then keeps them connected with this connective tissue of an idea or an ideal. So even if two people of one race are completely different, and again, when we say race, it's not ethnicity, it's an idea. Two people completely different, even in the way they think, but united by that connective tissue of that unifying ideal. The Path of Acra makes me think of that. Almost like an anti-mid-1900s Germany. And the thing I'm talking about, it's the third one. They were a spiritually involved bunch. It was a nation taken not just by ideology, but by spirit. I think it goes underreported how spiritually charged that nation was. And not just under Christ, God, whatever, even though for some reason I see them spun that way, but more like everything about them was designed to do two things. One, to bring everybody together and, brainwash them so they're easier to control, but at the same time, put an individual in into almost a spiritual psychosis, like getting them tripping on mysticism. I think part of humanity's fixation on war, it's not just about power, even though for low-level humans that is what it's all about. I think potent spirits get involved in combat. Time and divinity. I think war is where time and divinity strike each other. Anyway, I'm imagining a nation that isn't a nation, that could be controlled so easily, but rather a connective tissue generated by shared experience, by shared mysticism, specifically within our epoch. Impossible without the internet. An anti-nation of disconnected, connected people tripping alone and together on mysticism, stumbling, struggling, together and alone, through this path of Acra toward each individual's earthen tower. Most to die, some to make it, maybe, and ascend, maybe. And if not, then fulfilling their purpose because they're purpose fulfillers. You look at the star, maybe the way some chinless, blue-eyed person looked at another symbol, and you know you are at once ultimately alone and ultimately together. Not that you are united in unity with your fellow strugglers, but that you are all on the same path, and you aren't... It's a commonality with nothing in common. Ultimately alone and always together. Like living. You look at the star and you know. Know what specifically? Whatever it is you need to know, or maybe just that there is something to know, but the star takes you into that place of knowing. I've started working out again. Nothing serious at all, but I want to commit to the star. And that means in December branding myself, and I want to look at least presentable when I do it. There's something to describe here that I feel but can't say yet. I know I've said it before, touched on it before, but this knowing, dedication to is. I hate our world. I hate what we are, but I love what is. And I am eternally grateful we get to witness it. Especially from our point of view. Me from mine, you from yours. Your location in reality is irreplaceable. There will only ever be one instance of you, your moment, your time. It's a gift. I hate people. I hate how awful our world is. And I'll be singing when we're dead. But I am in awe of existence. And I'm so thankful we get to be part of it. Are you never just in awe of of everything? We're starting to go off the rails, so we'll cut it here, but take every opportunity you can to swim in existence. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.